one person, my heart still aches, haven't been able to photograph, is Nusrat Fateh Ali Khan. I was very young that time, and I remember, you know, uh, he had come to perform in Siri Fort, and I had no means to buy the ticket, and I couldn't see the performance.
Hello, welcome to Chaibrary. Today we have in our studio Bandeep Singh. Thank you, Bandeep ji, for coming. It was lovely to have you, and we are so honored that you could make time in your busy schedule because you are balancing the production of the magazine as well as your time as a photographer, as a photojournalist, and now you're giving us this interview. So thank you so much for coming. And we would start off straight away by asking you how you got into photography. You're a self-taught photographer, so how did that journey happen? We go back in time.
First of all, Georgina, it is a very, very exciting thing for me. I'm inside very excited. One has read you so much, and here I am talking to you. And it's for the first time we are having a conversation, and
Yes.
I'm very excited about it. You asked me about my journey as a photographer. So photography, let me put it this way, that I didn't become a photographer. Photography discovered me.
Wow.
And it happened on a college trip when I was on an NSS trip to Manali. And I had borrowed a small point and shoot camera from a friend, because everybody wanted their pictures. So we were on the second day of the trek. We were camping on the banks of the Bias. On our second day, we were on a trek. And while trekking, I had the camera with me, and we passed a village. And this was around, 5 o'clock in the evening.
Oh.
And this was in the month of June. And they had, the woman of the house had laid out some wheat to dry on the roof of the house. And she was sitting, spreading that wheat. And what had happened in the mountains, sometimes there is a particular quality of evening light with the setting sun.
Yeah.
The sun reclines, and and there's a cloud cover of gray, so the dissipation of light does not happen. So with the
Right.
neutral gray on the clouds, there's an extremely saturated light that comes. And that light happened that day, and it was absolutely golden.
Magical.
And it caught the golden sheaves of wheat, and it was as if the woman was spreading gold on the roof.
Wow.
And I saw that with my camera, and that moment, I feel, I can now in hindsight say that was the moment, of the proverbial fish, taking the hook. And I was snapped up by photography. What I saw through my viewfinder, it was a point and shoot camera. It was not a DSLR. You were seeing through a separate viewfinder, not through the lens of the camera. But what you were seeing, I was completely mesmerized with that.
Wow,
that
given me
here,
goosebumps.
yeah, here I am sitting, and there's this woman spreading gold on the rooftop.
Yeah.
And for me, perhaps, there's a karmic connection, like lost lovers meeting in a sequel. It's precisely that. There's some bond, there's some chemistry that happens. This happened with my eye and the light, and I knew that what I am photographing, what I'm seeing through this camera at this moment, is precisely what only I can see. It is something unique to me. There's an intimate connection that I'm having with what I'm seeing, and that, this I'm articulating later, but it was all happening at the moment, that time, in real time, and that was fascinating. It's a different matter that I didn't know how to get the exposure right, how to get the golden color in the in the wheat. The picture turned out to be disastrous.
Oh dear.
But the image, the seeing part,
What you saw
what
with
I
your eyes.
saw, that was very, very important, and that hooked
special.
me. So that there on, and during that entire trip, at that time we had rolls of film.
Film, yes.
And I had just one roll of film. That's how we used to photograph. One roll of film was good enough. And everybody thought all my friends thought ki camera hai. Everybody had pooled in for that one roll of film.
Oh wow.
None of them got any of their pictures, because that trip I was only shooting what I felt like shooting.
And they felt that they must have said,
yes,
Bandeep, what is this you're giving us? Where's our picture?
Hamari picture kahan hai,
So then, how did you progress after that? When did you get your first professional camera and gig?
That those are all things that fell into place. I began photographing. The thing was that I had no way to learn photography. I was growing up in a small town. As such, there was very little information available as to how you could study photography. I mean, you had to do the thing hands-on, and it was all analog photography.
Right.
So what you shot had to be processed somewhere else. The films had to be processed. Prints had to be made somewhere else. And, the interventions that you do to create your own kind of images, only professional photographers were able to do that. So you only associated yourself with professional photographers. But in small towns like Jalandhar, where I was growing up at that point of time, there were no professional photographers except the photo studio guys, the commercial photographers. So I made friends with a lot of commercial photographers, and I would pick up the tricks of the trade from them, and their primary discussions were how to get clients, how to create groups in the pictures. They were primarily wedding photographers. So, but I was interested in something else, So in evenings when they would be discussing wedding photography and all the intricacies of the wedding photography, I would be thinking something else, about how to shoot flowers or probably how to shoot landscapes. So I was an oddity there, but still I associated with them to learn the basic tricks. Right. And then I needed information, I needed knowledge, I needed to grasp knowledge for photography. So for me, the Daryaganj books market, that Patri market, that became my primary source of, getting reference material. You had old issues of popular photography that were available on the roadside. So I would come and rummage through piles of books just to find those old popular photography books, and magazines. And then, when I would I would come to Delhi on a Saturday. Sunday was spent searching the Patri market at Daryaganj, and whatever I would have, that felt like treasure. 4 magazines, 5 magazines, old magazines, 2 years, 3 years old, but I would go through them as if they were some kind of religious scriptures. Read even the ads, even the side notes, each word. I was like hungry for information, soaking each word, soaking every detail. And, that became a very big learning. I was like Eklavya, having that image of a invisible guru of photography and seeking it through magazines. And I was, because I was reading them so intensely, and I was primarily developing, practicing, using their words as my guiding instructions and learning through that.
Right. Now coming more to sort of current times, you did a whole series of photographs of during the COVID times. So that is in a way also a challenge for a photographer. I have this question, which is coming from Kevin Carter's experience, where he photographed a child dying, and then the vulture was there, and then he couldn't deal with that sort of dilemma of, should I have saved her or should I have photographed her? So this is something that somebody who's dealing with news photojournalism, because there's the beautiful picture which is of the flowers, as you mentioned, of the landscape, which is not controversial, but then there are also these moments in time and they get aestheticized, they win awards, and then the photographer has to deal with all that guilt, which is I personally think is really unfair. But as a photographer who's done both, what is your take on that? And who's also tell us about the COVID times also.
So what you're asking is a photographer's work in a situation of where there is some kind of a distress situation,
Yeah,
there is some kind
emergency.
of a human tragedy unfolding. We are guided, when I say we, I say as a representative of the photojournalist community, we are guided by the end purpose. The end purpose is to create a representation of that what is unfolding in front of us. It's a very, very tough task. And again, I say that in hindsight, when after having done these things for years now, the very act of photography does not happen sitting outside. It's real time. You have to go, in a situation. As Galib says, कि एक आग का दरिया है और डूब के जाना है. So you have to be in a situation. You have to, immerse yourself in a situation to get the image. Otherwise, the image is not happening. And the best images, are what you live. As Robert Capa very famously said, if you are not close enough, your images are not good enough.
Yeah.
So that is precisely what you have. You have to be in that tragedy. You have to be in a situation. If it's a riot situation, you have to be in that riot situation. If you are dealing with, if you're photographing, a loss of human life, you have to be in that situation. Now, there comes a dichotomy of, there are two people who are in that situation at that time. You as a human being and you as a photographer. And when I say you as a photographer and I make this distinction, I'm specifically talking about you as a person who is an operator of the camera, who is the technical operator of a camera, who is decoding that entire scene in terms of its technical quality, the light, the exposure, the shutter speed, the speed at which you have to photograph, everything that is complete mechanics. And that is also you. But there is also the human you, who is in that situation. To take any picture, any picture of a tragic scene, any picture of any scene, you also need a little bit of a detachment from the scene, And that detachment is important because you have to technically convert that scene into data,
Right.
into visual data, into physics, how you convert that into and you have to have that little bit of a detachment. As a human, you are completely affected by the scene, but you have to consciously detach yourself from the scene in order to take the picture.
Correct.
In that space arises guilt, that you were there, you are in that situation, and then you have to detach yourself from that. You have to cut yourself from that situation and become a visual recorder of that situation. And that detachment, when your human heart entangling with that situation has to be consciously pulled out to detach and then create an image of that. That is the situation where that is a very difficult situation. And that creates a subconscious weight on your soul.
Yeah.
And the greater your involvement in a situation as a human, the greater becomes that load on your soul. It's a difficult thing. It's a very difficult thing,
How does one navigate
to
that?
see, to bring that into the situation of the migrants when they were walking. You were seeing young kids, walk. You were seeing people, you were seeing women walk with, babies and, huge piles of luggage on their head. You could see them. And you were here, you were, privileged to be in a car following them. And you could not give them that lift in your car because you were working. You had to stop every minute. They have to continuously walk. And because you can't do that, I mean, there comes that load on your soul. And, but then, the kind of, the what is the word? You're vindicated by the fact that, the images move a lot of people.
Right, and you've recorded that historic moment.
Yes, and
which can be looked at
not just recorded it, but through the intensity of what you create, a lot of people feel that pain. A lot of people respond to that pain. Probably a lot of people seeing images of those kind, came out with, actual means to support people on the roads.
Right.
Now in that somehow you feel vindicated. Your work feels vindicated. But as you rightly said, the load is there. But it answers a very important question. Just now in my mind, it's absolute clarity. My wife constantly complains that I can't take a good picture of her. I'll now know what to tell her. That I can't detach myself from you.
So that's see, we found the personal answer also to that. To that very difficult question. Now let's also look at the whole, photography playing a role as an art form, and the photo market, what they call, that is also something which if you're not looking at it as a journalist, but you're looking at it as an artist. So then the role of photography kind of slightly changes. So the photographs entering the fine art space, there is that factor that there is a negative earlier, and now there is digital, and it can be reproduced. And the moment reproduction comes into the picture, then they're like, but there's a copy of this. It's not original, quote unquote. So that is another dilemma that I'm putting in front of you. I'm asking you all difficult questions.
No, but what is the question?
The question is, how does photography then sort of climb that mountain and be taken as, sometimes photographers cut their negative or they destroy the last print. They say, I'm making only 5 copies of this. And it's very hard to do, but they do it because they want that market value given to the photograph for it to be taken that seriously, that it's an art form.
See, Georgina, that is what you're asking me is something that it's not much of my concern. That is more a concern of someone like you, sitting outside the, art market, looking at it as a critic. It's a very important thing that you engage with. But me as a practitioner of photography and a practitioner of fine art photography to a very large extent, that is not a very big matter of concern. It is not because my emphasis and my focus in my life is to create images. What you are saying is about mass scale reproduction of an image that existed even before. That existed. The only time it did not exist, but it even existed even before the film era. You could use a wet plate to create multiple images. In film, you could use the negative to create as many images. It's just now that with the digital processes, the image making reproduction process has become a little more easier. It's not that the process is, it didn't happen earlier. Photography, for this reason, for its ability to be able to create prints, reproductions of its own, of the image, of the primary image, has, it has its place, and it is an accepted norm within the art industry that, it's the same for printmakers. Printmaking has the same dynamics has the same meter in which it operates, that even printmakers can create as many prints with the plate. But then you have limited editions. You declare your editions.
And you destroy the plate.
And you destroy the plate, or even if sometimes the plate is also used as an artwork.
Yeah.
So I am, in photography, what happens is what I do in my personal work for my fine artwork, I keep my editions, I declare my editions, and a lot of photographers create editions of different sizes. I don't do that. I create, I have a edition size across all sizes.
Right.
I don't, so if it's a 24 by 36 print, for me, when I say I'll have 5 prints of this edition, I mean those are 5 prints irrespective of the size.
The size, okay.
I will print a particular image only this time, only this many times. So yes, I maintain also there are certain images that I keep it as edition free. It's an open edition, but that is something that is purely in terms of how you position your imagery, how you position a fine art image, how you create value for it in terms of its market.
Yeah, and transparency has also got an important role to play in that.
Sorry?
Transparency, like in terms of how the photographer is upfront about it and says that
Yes.
I'm making only these, and then you have to trust.
But that is not just in photography, that is in every art form. Even a painter can reproduce a painting.
But it's not the same.
It's not the same, but it can be very close to the same. A lot of paintings that I see is done exactly in the same size, just changing a few colors here and there. That way, no prints are, you can create completely different prints from each other.
Of course, you can work on the surface.
You can work on the surface, you can do anything. But those are issues that I don't engage with. Those are not important issues for me.
Sorry to interrupt you, but I want to know, have you ever worked on the surface of, when you were doing, the photographs being developed in the dark room, did you ever work on the surface of the photograph?
Not on the surface, but yes, your burning and dodging of the areas, you created, there were shades of differences there. But they were very minuscule, because when you created an edition, you wanted the edition to look more or less the similar.
Right. And do you make any distinction between analog and digital, having done analog photography?
No, I don't believe in those distinctions at all. Okay. I'm a complete digital person now, and I have the only distinctions is, some photographers believe the analog process of not being able to see the image and the delay in your accessing the final image creates a certain kind of a extra engagement with the scene. It is not a part of my practice. For me, the engagement with the scene is irrespectively, it is governed by my own processes and my own mental states. And to me, whether I see the image immediately or see the image later that is not a very important thing. But now that we have access to digital photography, I feel it's a huge advantage to be able to do that. Right. Huge advantage.
This brings me to the other thing about, now everyone can take a photograph with a phone, or like it's become a lot more, democratic in that sense. And does that feel at anything, how does one challenge, what are the challenges you face with this democratization of the image?
This is the, Georgina, this is the question of the decade.
Yeah.
This is which we all photographers are grappling with. A very famous photographer, a few years ago, at a very important platform, declared photography is dead.
Yeah.
Because of this very reason, because of the flat level playing field that has been created. Yes, you can use apps to create in a minute effects and image types that you took years of practice and skill, to create when you were doing analog photography.
Yeah.
You can just create it like that. I did it, with the, the series that you referred to in our conversation before the interview started, the collodion wet plate effect.
Yes.
I did it on digital photographs, and I was thrilled with the whole idea of using the collodion wet plate effect, the archival process effect onto contemporary images.
Yeah.
But the more the playing field gets leveled, the more it is incentive for you to look beyond that playing field. The onus is on photographers to change the game. The profligacy of imagery on the internet, on digital mediums and social media, pushes me, at least on a daily basis, to create imagery that is completely different, that challenges that process, and also sometimes use that to an advantage. Use the imagery, use the language of multiplicity of imagery, the sheer volume of imagery, sheer availability of apps and processes, to use that imagery to create, those processes to create new imagery, and to adapt those processes to situations where those processes haven't been adapted before.
Right.
For example, few years ago, there's a very common technique of, now you see images that are multiple exposure images.
Right.
Where images are altered and layered onto different textures. I mean, there's a very famous series of images that have been done, that came out in the past 4 or 5 years, of hands covering the face and the image appearing on the hand.
Yes.
Now, I used this technique to photograph Irfan Khan,
Right,
for an
right.
image that I did on the person coming out, breaking through the walls of tradition and of
Stereotypes,
stereotypical religious practices, and he spoke against them. And I used that as a metaphor of him breaking out of this thing to hide behind tradition, and breaking through that, using that very technique of contemporary images that are being facilitated, or rather being made easy by the digital processes.
Right.
So that becomes an interesting challenge, where you take that and adapt it to a situation where it becomes metaphorical.
Right.
You change the grounds, you change the contexts. Instead of doing images just to please, the iPhone, for example, allows you to do pictures with infinite depth of field. Now you use that to create imagery that uses infinite depth of field in ways that are completely different.
Yes.
So that is a challenge that you give yourself, and create imagery based on that.
Now that you've mentioned Irfan Khan, in fact, one of my questions was going to be about, photographing important personalities. Has there been anyone that you've felt who passed away that I wish I had taken his photograph, or I'd taken her photograph? And then how do you sort of deal with that?
Oh yes, there are people who I always wanted to photograph. One person, my heart still aches, haven't been able to photograph, is Nusrat Fateh Ali Khan. I was very young that time, and I remember, he had come to perform in Siri Fort, and I had no means to buy the ticket, and I couldn't see the performance. and all I did was I managed to you know, jump over the wall and managed to reach the backstage somehow. And but that guard caught me and he wouldn't let me enter, and I could only see a glimpse of him through the wings of the stage, and I couldn't, you know,
You
do
couldn't
anything, and
photograph. Oh,
I had to leave. And you know,
oh,
that still hurts, you know, that
I can imagine.
and he passed away shortly after that. You know, Nusrat Fateh Ali Khan Sahab, I really wanted to photograph. I would have loved to photograph.
And what about your mentors, people who you look up to? You know, your what should I say? The photographers who you emulate, or who have been a, what should I say, inspiration to you.
See, when I started my career, when I became a student of photography, I, without using a cliche, I would, you know, say it upfront that I still consider myself a student of photography.
Sebastiano Salgado, he's the person.
Sebastiano Salgado.
Yes, yes.
So so there were a lot of photographers who were big influences, and when you are in a state of learning and imbibing, everybody who's done anything different, any good work, is a source of inspiration.
Right.
I also, like any other photographer who's learning, I had multiple sources of inspiration. You know, I learned from so many people. I was an éclavier, you know, learning from Popular Photography magazine,
Right.
and whoever was represented in those Popular Photography magazine pages became my de facto guru in some part or the other, you know. And that's, but the good thing was that I was not that allowed me to learn completely in diverse you know, streams of photography. Because if there was a special issue on fashion, I would learn about fashion. If there was a special issue on outdoor photography, I would learn from that about outdoor photography. There was a special issue on portraiture, I would learn on portraiture. So my learning became diversified because my sources of inspiration were diversified.
Diverse, right.
And I, you know, learned from so many people, you know. Of course, Salgado is a huge influence, but I want to tell you that when I look for inspiration, I just don't look up. I look around.
Around.
I look also down for inspiration. You know, I look all around for inspiration. And nowadays, you know, one of my biggest learnings and joys and excitement nowadays is to learn from completely young photographers who are taking to Instagram, and who are taking to Instagram with complete irreverence for tradition. You know, I love them. I love their work. I love how they see the world. I wish I want to use their language. I want to practice what they are doing. You know, it's inspiring for me. And similarly, it's not just in photography. A lot of times I seek inspiration from illustrators, from graphic design, from design per se, from painting, a lot of music, huge influence. A particular music track that I have heard can completely alter my approach towards taking a particular picture.
So what kind of music do you like? I mean, now that we've talked about music.
So I listen very intensely. So for me, music can never play in the background. Because when I'm listening music, I have to be listening to music. And I'm listening to music almost visually. You know, each sound, each nuance, you know, is something that I catch and I feel, you know, when I'm listening to music. So there are times when I listen to music, I listen to music. And again, I don't straitjacket my choices of music as well, just like I don't straitjacket my choices of photography. Anything can, you know, completely move me. Off late, there is, some of the tracks that play on Instagram Reels are complete, huge things of devotion for me.
Right.
It moves me hugely. There is a particular track playing nowadays on a lot of Instagram Reels. It's a track by AP Dillon, and it's called Summer Blues. I just love that track. It just makes me so serene, and it has, I have spiritual responses in me. It is a completely out and out contemporary Punjabi lounge music, but I have a completely different response to it because I don't straitjacket it.
Right. So that is where the power lies. You
Yes.
feel. Yeah. And tell us a little bit about your plans for the future. What are your future projects that you're looking forward to?
I am doing a lot of fine art work. At any point of time, I have 5-6 projects, that I'm engaging with simultaneously. And my fine art work is completely long term. I work on a project for years and years until and unless I can't work on it anymore. That's when I know. So for me, doing a personal project is like, creating a growth paradigm for your own self. You use that to fuel your growth. And I work on, so my, last project was on the parallels between the idea of the body and the vessel. And that took me 12 years to work on. And subsequently there was a project that I started then on the whole idea of the concept of Shringar in Indian culture, and based on Geet Govind. So that is fructifying now after 18 years.
Wow.
Another project that I have done on documentation of the Sikh way of life. It's still ongoing even after 25 years.
Wow.
So for me, projects are,
They can keep.
It's a personal thing. I like to grow with my project. It's my way of understanding something in a much more core kind of way. So so in future, a lot of work is going on certain projects.
On these projects that you
And so among other things that I spoke to you about my project in Sikhism, I mean, also in the pipeline, there's a project I'm doing on Natya Shastra. There's a project I'm doing on Sufism, a project on landscapes. So there's a lot of work happening simultaneously, because you are in different situations at different times. A new thing is that I'm painting a lot.
Oh, wow.
I'm painting a lot. I do calligraphy, and I'm doing calligraphic abstractions. That is taking a lot of my time. That is exciting for me right now.
That's exciting for us as well. We'd love to see that. I hope you plan some exhibition around that as well.
Again, like me, with me, everything becomes long term.
It takes time.
because what I see, what I do now, I don't like it the next day. I feel there is a scope to improve it the next day. See, point is, when you're doing your part of your art practice, for me is not the end is not to create artwork. The end is to grow as a person. And if you're growing in it as a person, that growth you want to record through, pieces of, like pieces of art that are a byproduct of that growth.
Right.
And that is fascinating.
And just one last question, which is your advice to the upcoming generations. Like you said, you love going through Instagram and seeing what they're doing, which is also kind of breaking the rules in so many ways. Tell us about that, and also what would be your advice to them? As someone who's seen so many different decades of photography in that sense.
See, my advice to a lot of young photographers come and meet me, seeking advice, seeking, people seeking review of their work. Uh, I mean, I don't advise people on techniques and what to do, what camera to use, and all that and all that. My primary advice is the larger things that define, that have worked for me. Learn from maximum sources. Don't just learn from photography. Learn from everything. Become a student of the art, and the art will reward you. It will come into your work. It will flow through your work. A lot of times, something that I observe, which is very, very typical of this generation, if I may use the word, is, I see an impatience. I don't see the application and this kind of wrestling with the craft. I see an impatience to create an image and put it out there, and seek instant gratification of, the likes and the responses and followers. And while all this has its, advantages, and it inspires you to do work, but it somehow short circuits your growth process. The urgency to put an image out there, to put something out there, somewhere, I feel is a process which stops a thing. It stops an inquiry. Or rather, if I may put it more openly, it pauses an inquiry, not stops, pauses an inquiry. If you cannot allow that pause to happen in your constant inquiry and evolution, that is, anything that allows that to happen is what is desired and is what you should imbibe. That's my advice.
Thank you so much, Bandeep ji, for the time and for the advice, and all of us who have been having this wonderful journey with you through the truth. We went to the time when you were looking at Nusrat ji through the cracks in the theatre, to telling us about how we should not look for that instant gratification, which has unfortunately become part of our everyday existence. Even if you don't want it to come in there, when you see you've got 150 likes, something happens to you. So I would say that we need to balance. We need to balance and look for that balance.
See, the likes, the responses, the comments, the adulation, that you receive, it should be something, it should not be an end in itself.
That shouldn't be, absolutely.
It should not be an end itself. It should not stop your constantly questioning your work, your practice, your ethics, your medium. That questioning should be constantly alive.
Right, absolutely.
We have my favorite go-to mantra in this is this thing that we have in our thought, is this Sanskrit term called neti neti.
Oh yes.
Which means that, this is not, this is not.
This is not.
Everything that you do, if you can apply this mantra to it, that this is not, you will actually
you'll keep
grow.
moving ahead.
You'll keep moving ahead.
Because you always see
it's like that switch, that gear that constantly pushes you forward.
True, true. Thank you, Bandeep ji, so much for your time and for coming to the studio and being with us on Chaibrary. And we'd really like to reach out to our viewers to tell them that you can always follow us on Facebook, on Instagram, and on Twitter. Give us your love and support so that we can continue to bring to you new episodes on art and culture and literature. Thank you so much. Bye.